Welcome back to Ocean Casino's incredible gallery bar, booking games where the fans are starting to file in for this late Sunday afternoon kickoff with the Buffalo Bills set for 4:25 this afternoon at Lincoln Financial Field, and the environment certainly being electric here in Atlantic City. Let's bring in Bill Colarulo, our other analyst. Obviously, we're going to get to John McMullen standing by once again at Lincoln Financial Field momentarily. But, Bill, you have an interesting take on this game where turnovers obviously always matter but could matter in particular in this game today.
Turnovers in the NFL are always important, but even more so when you're playing this Buffalo Bills offense. They're really top 10 in almost every single category. They've been moving the ball really well. They score a lot of points. But they're 26th in the NFL in turnovers. And you look at their 6 wins, they have a turnover differential of +9, and in their 5 losses, a turnover differential of -9. So it's really been feast or famine with this team. I know we're worried about Lane Johnson. We're worried about this offense. But the key to this game, getting takeaways on Josh Allen and this Bills offense.
More important today than most games, especially when facing a quarterback like Josh Allen is coming into this game with a 7 straight game interception streak. Not good for Josh Allen. All right, let's go to Lincoln Financial Field. And, John, I know last time we talked it was in Kansas City and it was a little rainy, so I have to ask you to put on that meteorology hat again. What's it doing right now at Lincoln Financial Field, friend?
Yeah, the rain is here, guys. It is raining pretty steadily, so it's going to be another game. It's supposed to rain throughout the game again. And you saw Kansas City, I don't think you saw a sloppy play, but at the end of the day, neither offense was that explosive. So clearly affected some things, and you expect maybe the same this afternoon because it's not going to let up.
Certainly. Now, as far as Lane Johnson, we know that he is inactive right now. What's the expectation there? Is Jack Driscoll out there? Is he going to get the start at right tackle?
Yeah, Jack Driscoll's going to get the start. He was out working, as I mentioned before, after the decision was made. It's pretty clear they made the decision on the field but didn't announce it until they had to, which was at 2:55 basically. Jack Driscoll was immediately out there working with Cam Jurgens a little bit, trying to get that feel, that chemistry for playing right tackle. So, you know, the Eagles have options. Tyler Steen was a 4-year right tackle at Vanderbilt before he moved to left tackle at Alabama. Fred Johnson's here, but he's mainly a left tackle. Jack Driscoll's got the most experience, and they will start with Jack Driscoll, and we'll see how long the leash is.
Hey, John, talk about this Bills offense for a second. They fired their offensive coordinator 2 weeks ago, Ken Dorsey. You look at the stats, they're really top 10 in almost every single category outside of turnovers. They obviously can't fire Josh Allen as the quarterback, but do you think that Ken Dorsey was kind of the scapegoat here when it's really mostly Josh Allen's issues?
Oh, sure. Anytime you have a team with expectations firing a coordinator in season, as you mentioned, Bill, they have the 6th ranked offense in the NFL. So, yeah. But they're 6-5, and this Bills team has been significant playoff contenders for a number of years now. So, you know, they scapegoated Ken Dorsey. There's no question about it. And, you know, I hesitate to say bench Josh Allen, as you mentioned. I mean, for people who want to criticize, and I've said it a lot, Josh Allen is too reckless at times, but he is a big-time playmaker. So I would not let my guard down on Josh Allen. If he's got his A game, he is one of the most difficult quarterbacks in the NFL to deal with. And, you know, it'd be nice to turn him over a couple times. He's susceptible to that. Again, he will, but he's got a little Brett Favre in him, a little bit of a gambler. He's got such a strong arm. He thinks he can put the football in the tight windows. So he'll give you a couple opportunities to get turnovers, and hopefully you can take advantage of them. But I hesitate to think Josh Allen is a negative on this particular team. I would still say it's the exact opposite.
Hey, John, last week the Buffalo Bills got healthy on the New York Jets. You know, they ran the ball better than they ran it all season long. The Eagles gave up 121 yards on the ground last week in the first half to the Kansas City Chiefs. Any sense for, how they plan on remedying this? I know that they like to get to their 5-man front, to satisfy, to be able to take care of the run. It seems to me that the linebackers really struggle in the run game out of their 4-man front, but they dominate out of their 5-man front particularly.
Yeah, I mean, and that obviously starts with Jordan Davis, as you know, Seth, but also Milton Williams has had a tremendous year. I think he's one of the more underrated players on this team, especially when it comes to stuff in the run. And he's been doing it from, whether it's 3 technique, 4-eye, 5 even. He plays a bunch of different techniques, and he's really good at them all. So it's difficult to find players like that, and that's one of the absences. We're all talking about Lane Johnson, understandably so, but Milton Williams not being there is going to affect the Eagles as well. I don't think it's going to be as bad last week as it was in Kansas City. I think that was a bit of an outlier, certainly as poorly as the Eagles have played against the run this season. But James Cook is having a good year. It's the first time in a couple years that Buffalo's had a somewhat significant running game. So you have to worry about it a little bit more than usual. The Bills with Josh Allen and Devin Singletary, that they basically never ran the ball. So they're a little bit better balanced. And I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest, because they're not as good as a team as they were when they were chucking the ball all over the place. So, but they're 11th in the NFL in the rush, 7th in the pass. So, it's much more balanced, but it hasn't turned into success on the field. 6-5 is a big disappointment for Buffalo. They're used to much more than that in recent seasons.
John, we were talking earlier about Brian Johnson, Eagles offensive coordinator, and one of the things that I asked was basically, are you in or out on Brian Johnson, the job that he has done so far this season, because his name has become a bit of a lightning rod amongst the Philadelphia fan base. When it comes to the job he has done, and we've seen improvement especially in the red zone, how would you evaluate Brian Johnson as the offensive coordinator and play caller for this football team?
Yeah, I'm with Nick on this one. I don't get people criticize Brian Johnson, and if you have a problem with him, just wait, because he's probably not going to be here next year. At least if the Eagles keep at this level, he's going to be a head coach in this league sooner rather than later. That's one of those things where Nick kind of talked about, Bob Lang getting him prepared for questions and just shaking his head when the people criticizing him. The Eagles have done an almost eerily similar job offensively to last year, when everybody thought they had this tremendous world-beating offense. I think they're scoring a half point less. So it's been kind of seamless offensively. And you could argue certain plays. I mean, my dislike of the bubble screen is well documented, but the Eagles overused it when Shane Steichen was here as well. And last week in Kansas City, while it wasn't working, it did set up the inside screen to DeAndre Swift. So part of it is that. It's an extension of the running game. When expectations are where they are for this particular team, 9-1 for the second consecutive season, people get skewed and they expect so much. Brian's done a tremendous job, and I can't believe people talk about him like he's doing a poor job.
And John, Brian Johnson has his hands full today. Even before Lane Johnson was out, they gave up 5 sacks in the first half last week to the Chiefs. And this week they're going against one of the best defenses in the league when it comes to getting after the quarterback. If you're Brian Johnson, what are you doing to slow down that Bills pass rush, especially guys like Von Miller and Leonard Floyd?
Yeah, you have to see, one, how Jack Driscoll settles in. So you might have some problems. Everybody talks about wins and losses aren't a quarterback stat and blah, blah, blah. Well, wins and losses have become a right tackle stat in Philadelphia. And it's almost to the point where, I think the Eagles are 12-22 without Lane Johnson. And when you compare that to the record when he's on the field, it is unbelievable. So I think number one, you have to feel how Jack Driscoll's handling things. And if he's not handling things well, I think you have to be quicker to adjust. Now, the problem is not only is Dallas Goedert out, but Grant Calcaterra's out as well. So you're dealing with tight ends, Jack Stoll, and then Albert Okwuegbunam, plus Noah Tungia, who just returned. So they have some issues at tight end as well. This could be a problem. And, you know, the bet you could say keep the backs in the chip, but that's not a strength of the running backs on this team, pass protection. So it is something to keep an eye on. Because as you mentioned, the Buffalo Bills can come at you from a bunch of different ways when it comes to the pass rush. And they have a bunch of bodies, whether it's Leonard Floyd, A.J. Epinesa, Ed Oliver inside, Greg Rousseau. Really good pass rush.
So then that leads me to this question, John. I'm sure, you know, you get it every single week from me. Any feel for what direction they're going to go from a run-pass standpoint? Last week they ran the ball 27 times, only passed it 22 times, probably in large part because of, you know, the weather. Seems like, you know, we're going to have similar weather today and so many lineup changes along the offensive line. Any feel for what that may look like today?
Yeah, well, I say every week, Seth, it's not a run-first offense, not a pass-first offense. Jalen Hurts, so number one, is he healthy? He looked healthy, at least healthier in Kansas City. I think that was a big part of the run game. Getting more involved. DeAndre Swift had some success also. That factors into it. Are they going to be up 2 scores or down 2 scores? If they're up 10-0, you're going to see more running game. If they're down 10-0, obviously you're going to see more passing game. So I do think that's one of those things where you come in with that first 15 scripted plays. Maybe that part of it's heavy run because of the rain. But then the rest of the game, you have to adjust to what's going on. And the Eagles tend to do that. But Nick Sirianni as a whole, and this is his offense, whether it's Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, next year it might be Kevin Patullo. It's Nick Sirianni's offense. He's like a lot of modern coaches. If he had his druthers, yeah, let's be honest, he'd like to pass the ball. And certainly they want to get A.J. Brown more involved after 1 catch and 4 targets in Kansas City.
John, on the defensive side of things for this football team, one of the things that was brought up this week, the Nick Sirianni, as well as Brian Johnson, was facing another Jim Johnson disciple, if you will, going from Steve Spagnuolo last week to now Sean McDermott this week, the man who actually took over for Jim Johnson. When you look at these two defenses, do you see a lot of similarities that will benefit Jalen Hurts today, having seen Steve Spagnuolo last week and McDermott this week?
You know what? I don't. Steve's more in the category. Steve's really aggressive, so he's more in the category. Not that he's the same, but Wink Martindale, Brian Flores, who's going to bring a lot of pressure. If you think about Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier, who was also on those Eagles coaching staffs earlier in his career, he was the coordinator here until Sean took it back this year, the play calling. And he's more of a cover 2 guy, cover 3 guy, zone guy. So even though they go back to Jim Johnson, they've kind of morphed in the time since then. So I don't see a ton of similarities. The Bills would prefer to get after you in the more conventional fashion. And they've been able to do so for the most part with a 4-man rush and keep as many people in coverage as possible. Whereas Steve Spagnuolo is going to try to get you in 3rd and long and come at you from all different angles. So I don't see a carbon copy or anything of that nature.
John, for this Philadelphia Eagles defense, last week you saw Kevin Byard do a pretty good job shutting down Travis Kelce. Well, the Buffalo Bills got a really good young tight end in Dalton Kincaid. Do you expect to see Byard line up across from him today?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, Kevin Byard is so big to this team in the second half of the season. And we finally saw some of what Tennessee has seen over the years. He's one of the best in the NFL when it's come to dealing with tight ends. And the Eagles, I'm just looking for it. They've given up a quarterback rating of 127.9 on passes to tight ends this season, which is 32nd in the NFL. So it's got to improve. It did start to improve in Kansas City. I think that's going to continue. And I think Kevin Byard's, he's going to be a big part of it.
John, the Eagles jumped from 29th in the red zone a few weeks ago to 9th in the red zone now. And no one seems to be talking about that precipitous jump. What do you attribute, to the change down in the red zone?
Well, I think they've been, better on first and second downs. Nick talked about it early in the season. They were having a lot of negative plays. And then all of a sudden you're in those third and long situations, and it makes things more difficult. Eventually, whether it was penalties, whether it was missed blocks, whether it was relying too much on the quarterback run game, and people were overloading towards stopping that, the Eagles evolved a little bit. And that's why we say, the NFL as a whole is a small sample size, even when you get through 17 games. And it's always a skewed sample size because it's an unbalanced schedule. Everybody doesn't play everybody. And obviously you skew it from there, good teams versus bad teams. But the more you play, the more those things tend to settle down. And as you mentioned, Seth, all of a sudden they're top 10. So they go from the bottom 3 to top 10 in a number of weeks. That's how quickly things can change. And basically, they just stopped shooting themselves in the foot in those early down situations. And when it's third and manageable for the Philadelphia Eagles, they're difficult to stop.
John, before we let you go, we know the weather. We know about Lane Johnson. So what is your latest prediction for Eagles-Bills today?
Yeah, I'm going to downgrade the score. I had it as a high-scoring game. I think the weather's going to affect that. I think Lane Johnson, I think Eagles got to go about it a little bit differently. It's tough to pick against this team right now, even without Lane Johnson. 26-2, we know the numbers with Jalen Hurts, his last 28 starts. 14-1, last 15 starts at Lincoln Financial Field. And get this one, guys, 13-0 against winning teams. That is the longest streak against winning teams since 1950. Since 1950. So it's tough for me to pick against them. I think they'll find a way to win, probably 23-20.
And just out of curiosity, what was it prior to the rain and prior to Lane Johnson?
33-26.
Okay, copy that.
More of a shootout.
Understood. John McMullen, always great catching up with you. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again at halftime, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. John McMullen, co-host of Birds 365 right here on the JAKIB Media Sports channel. We'll be back with more in a few. But first, let us talk right now about our great friends at the EBOD Foundation. As we know, we are trying to combat Alzheimer's and we're trying to combat dementia as well. And we're doing so with our Score for a Cure contest going on right now. Our contest and promotion to go with the EBOD Foundation, that's EBOD, as well as JAKIB Media. Here's what you could do. You could text SCORE for a Core. Text the word SCORE to 833-202-9835. That is 833-202-9835. Text the word SCORE for our big game sweepstakes. Also, use the promo codes Team Miss, Team Seth, Team Gun. Yes, that's Gun with 2 N's. And Team Farzi as well. Right now, Team Miss Nelly is a little bit in the lead, just edging out Seth Joyner. Just edging out by a couple of votes. So your vote, your text, could make a big difference to be a part of our big golf event that we're going to be throwing here. Just text the word SCORE to 833-202-9835, and you can help a great cause. More on Eagles-Bills coming up in a